There is also, and this is where I think populist politicians in many continents around the world are working very hard, it is to systematically undermine institutions, to systematically undermine individuals within those institutions, and then systematically undermine the institutions themselves, using a playbook of disruption, using a playbook of chaos, using a playbook that no institution, and indeed the individuals within it, can be trusted or should be trusted, and actually do not have people's best interests at heart. How we address that, I think, is a real challenge. And I don't think on the political spectrum, whether it's left or right or centre, actually we have worked out how to challenge that. And that is something we need to understand if we're going to address the challenges they bring. In addition, though, and perhaps in a way more optimistically, all of the things I've mentioned, from pandemics, as we've shown over the last 3 or 4 years, to energy use, to conflict, to inflation, to debt, these are now affecting not just one part of the world, but all parts of the world. The demographic shifts, the continued scourge of infectious diseases in my area, or a rise of non-communicable diseases, are as important in every capital city, in every country of the world. That brings a degree of convergence, which, if you were an optimist, might say we therefore have a shared destiny. And if you have a shared destiny, you're probably better to work together than work apart. I think that convergence of interest is an opportunity for us to push the boundaries of what might be possible and address the issue of mistrust. Politically, I think, and this is the first time I've ever worked within a civil service, now an international civil service, but I did work during the COVID crisis with some colleagues here on the SAGE advisory group in the UK, and I've seen this in many other countries as well. There is a challenge at the moment politically between short-term expediency of a political cycle and the long-term trends that I've described. And many political systems in many countries, independent of the political system that they're operating, are struggling with how to deal with this afternoon's newspapers and challenges, whilst knowing that they need to put in place long-term changes to address the long-term trends. How we address those, and we have the ability to not just react like a guinea pig in a wheel, if that translates, running all the time to react to today's headlines, whilst thinking about these long-term trends which require much more systemic approaches. And in the political arena we live in currently, there is much stronger incentive to deal with the short term than there is to deal with the long term, the benefits of which may well be seen by your successor. So the complex world we live in might give you the sense that there's no point doing anything. It is the moment of maximum opportunity. Because science has a role, and again, every time I use the word science, I mean science in its very, very, very broadest sense. And I'll come back to that, because I think one of the dangers of science is the siloization of science into different ologies and the inability to work at interfaces. But the overarching science of the broad scientific agenda has a way of helping answer all of the questions, I think, that we face. Science is making enormous progress. We saw during the COVID pandemic, and it's on top of everybody's mind, the development of COVID vaccines, which were truly remarkable. But we should not forget that those COVID vaccines were never invented in a year. They were invented 20 to 30 years ago. Indeed, the Nobel Prize that was given for their development was because of investment back in the 1980s, so almost over 40 years ago. And that's a very important lesson to remember, because science doesn't happen when you want it on a Tuesday morning. If you do not invest in science over many, many decades in things that you think may have no relevance or any future, and somebody made this point yesterday, then you won't have the scientific breakthroughs when you want and you may come to need them. But science is going on at a phenomenal pace. Historically, that has mostly happened in the public sector. Increasingly, that's happening in the private sector as well. And in the private sector, it's happening in non-public companies. That means that some of it is not visible or transparent to the whole of the world. And that's an issue. Also, what it means is we tend to have things which suddenly pop into the public consciousness, and we haven't really prepared for them. And so anticipating what trends are coming in science becomes absolutely crucial. And it's great to see here the GESDA group, that I was part of on the board for many years, looking to try and anticipate what science is coming rather than reacting to it. Because if we have to react to it, we will often prevent the innovation that lies behind it because we'll be frightened, or it'll have gone so far along its track already that it's impossible to put the genie back in the bottle. And as we, again, are all working in all our organizations, running every morning, every afternoon, every hour, we somehow have to find the capacity to stand back and ask ourselves where we're going and anticipate the future rather than reacting to it. Because if we don't try and anticipate the future, I worry that the advances in science that are going at tremendous speed at the moment will either lose the support of society, they will lose the support of the diplomatic and political class because they won't understand it, and I do fear there's a divergence that is going on between our political class and our scientists, leading to the inability to anticipate, to regulate, and to promote science, and yet not kill it, but do so to the benefits of all. And if we can't anticipate that science that's coming, then I do also have a concern that we will increase inequality rather than reduce it. And if we increase inequality from where we are today, then most of the world's problems that I described at the start will only get worse.